Greetings. Let's talk. In the SCA, we spend a lot of time talking about choosing and registering a name. And one of the stories I like to tell is it's an allegory, not a real story per se, but there are, generally speaking, three types of people. At least when I was looking for my name, there were really three types of people who joined the SCA. You have the red-headed, third-generation Scottish-American girl who walks in and wants a traditional, classic Scottish name and wants to research the hell out of it. And then you have the absolutely stereotypical, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, central German guy who walks in and he goes, I'll take any name in the book except German because I'm sick and tired of being reminded I'm German. And then you have the guy who walks in who has a vague idea of what his heritage may or may not be, and he more or less puts a map up on the wall and throws a dart at it and says, yeah, I'll register from there. Now, obviously, there's a lot more nuance to this conversation than those three hyperbolic examples. But I think it serves as a good lesson of the spectrum of attitudes that go into name selection. And of course, with your name comes your persona. When you register a name, you are, by definition, at least narrowing down what persona or what area and time within the world your persona is from. So I really can't add any definitive knowledge to this. I'm not going to be able to offer some metric or some story or some system or policy or whatever that's going to help everyone or even a large swath of people understand and how and to choose a name. I don't have that power. What I did want to do is I wanted to share my journey in how I chose my name. And I'll fully admit up front, this is not going to be any great revelation. This is not going to be any earth-shattering narrative, and I don't even think it's going to be directly useful to a lot of people. But I want to start the internal conversation with you about what can go on in this decision-making progress. What do you want out of your name? And if my story causes you to go, oh wow, or what if, or how, then my goal here is achieved. I want to offer new members, and I want to offer veteran players who are talking and working with new members a tool to stimulate those type of conversations. And really, my name journey predates the SCA. Allow me to explain. Probably about 60 years ago now, a young woman named Catherine Anderson was at college, and I think it was the dorm mom. She was at Virginia Wesleyan, set her up on a blind date. And Catherine was so nervous about this blind date. In fact, she was so not wanting to do this, she tried to climb out her own dorm window to get out of the date. Something went wrong, and she didn't make it. She wound up getting muscled up to the door to go on this date. And she came back a few hours later, and her roommate asked her, how was the date? Are you going to go on another one? And her reply was, well, I'm probably going to marry this one, so a second date is kind of a foregone conclusion. And that was the story of how my mother, Catherine Anderson, met my father, Captain Francisco Cividanis, who was a pilot candidate in the United States Marine Corps at the time. When Mom and Dad found out that they were expecting me, I don't know all the details of their decision-making progress, but I know that if it was a boy, the tradition they wanted to uphold was they wanted to name me after my father, because my father is the second member of his family to carry the name Francisco. My grandfather, Sergeant Francisco Paquito Cividanis, was retired U.S. Army at the time. And my father, of course, was Francisco Manuel Cividanis, which is why he's not junior, was Marine Corps at the time. And that very proper Puerto Rican Catholic tradition of carrying on the father's name appealed to my parents. So I was born Francisco Manuel Cividanis Jr. Now, this immediately led to a logistical question around the house, and that is, what do you call me? Because my father's name was Cisco, and having two Ciscos in the house just it invites disaster for communication, and that's fair. So I went by Frank, and for the first 10 years of my life, everyone knew me as Frank. And there's nothing wrong with Frank. There are plenty of Franks. There are plenty of really famous Franks. There's nothing wrong with the name. I was not a small child. I was tall to begin with. I got taller. And I was, now granted, my first grade teacher, who I do not have fond memories of, but that's another story, was a tiny woman. But I was literally taller than every teacher, almost every teacher I went to school with in elementary and grade school. Without exception. There's one, like in fourth grade, Mr. Rogers was taller than me by like an inch, but I was 6 foot by the time I was 10. I towered over people. And this is relevant because when you are neurodivergent, not one of the popular kids, and your name is Frank, it doesn't take long for people to hang the nickname Frankenstein on you. And it wasn't said in an endearing way. I hated the name. I hated the nickname, and it really got under my skin where it got so prevalent that some of the teachers started slipping and saying it to me. It wasn't pretty. So when my father got orders and moved from that duty station, I was up in Philadelphia, when he moved down to Northern Virginia because he was assigned to the Pentagon. New school, knew everything. It was a typical military story. Everyone would just pick up, and you don't know anyone when you get there. And I decided at the age of 10 I was going to change my name. And I was outside the house. I was going to go by Cisco. So we get down there, and we moved over the summer, and we go out to school for Meet the Teacher night. I meet my teachers and books, and, all the usual. And I made sure to introduce myself as Cisco. And there was a lot of, I had to think about it, because I'd gone by Frank for 10 years. And I remember, my parents told me this decades later, but when they went to that first parent-teacher conference night, which that was a thing at the school I went to. Every teacher, you had a parent-teacher conference night where you come in and talk about your students, so there wasn't any trouble or anything. They said that they were actually blown away by the fact that when they met all of the teachers and the vice principal and the guidance counselor and talked to everyone, and they even bumped into a few of the other students that I went to class with, everyone knew me as Cisco. And Mom said that's where it registered. Oh yeah, he was serious. And through all of middle school and all of high school and the rest of my life, people knew me as Cisco. And which, as a side note, did make for interesting conversations at home, because I still, even to this day, if I go home, I go by Frank, because Dad lives there, and we're not going to have two Ciscos in the house. That's just a communication nightmare. And so someone would call the house and ask for Cisco, which would lead to, all right, do you mean Big Cisco or Little Cisco? And the trouble is that I was 2 inches taller than my father by the time I got to high school. So big and little were a little relative. And then I went to college and I discovered the SCA a few months into college. And when, actually it was Jarl Owen, at the time it was just Lord Owen, but when Jarl Owen explained to me the whole idea of taking a new name and registering it and taking on a persona, it really tapped into that same theme of establishing my own identity. Because when I got to 6th grade, I established a new identity by calling myself Cisco. No one was going to call me Frankenstein. That all of the names and the taunts from that. Now, did other names and taunts come in? Yeah, but still, I had won a major victory by establishing myself a new name, a new persona. And it tapped into that same theme. And I wanted to take advantage of that, but there also were certain patterns that I was very, very intent on keeping. My birth name is Francisco, which is the Spanish name for Francis, and it's specifically named after Saint Francis of Assisi. The Spanish and the Muslims both are quote-unquote horrible about naming their kids after religious figures. I mean, both cultures, no exception, no shade, but yeah, religious figures, Saint Francis, Jesus, Joseph, Maria, Mary, all of it. And for 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades, I went to Catholic school, so not only was I acutely aware of the story of St. Francis, and I know his legacy, and I know who he was and what he did and the miracles associated with him. St. Francis is not a minor saint, he's a major saint, which meant every year I got my birthday off, because St. Francis Day is my birthday. And I'm saying all that because in establishing my identity, I wanted to pay homage to my name. I wanted to pay homage to the idea of a name invoking a powerful, influential figure. And I didn't want it to be powerful and influential in the absolute sense. I wanted a name that carried a legacy with it. So I kind of methodically said, let's do a saint's name. Literally, there are books out there. If you don't know this, there's literally whole books on saints, and all the saints are alphabetized. So you can just flip through, and there's the saint, and there's what they're the patron saint of, and there's this tiny little blurb with what they did, in their lives that ultimately earned them sainthood. And I grabbed a saint's book and just started flipping through it. And yeah, there's hundreds of entries. So I spent a lot of time, and this was all at meetings. It wasn't pre-internet, but it sure as hell was before I had internet in my dorm room or a smartphone. So this was 3 or 4 SCA meetings, 3 or 4 weeks of the Herald bringing the Herald's box every night and letting us grab books and just flip through it. And I read about St. Jerome, St. Joseph, and there were so many names, and there's some really cool stories. And aside from theological and religious philosophies, there were some absolutely amazing stories in there. I was in awe of some of these people and their accomplishments in life. Even the accepting ones, even if we move past any of the speculative supernatural ones, the couple of these stories were just amazing. But one of the ones I found was the patron saint of lawyers and judges, who refused to throw a case. He refused a bribe from the crown. And when the bribe didn't work, the crown threatened to throw him in jail, and he refused to throw the case. And then when the crown threw him in jail, he said, all you do is throw the case, and he stayed in there for years, decades. He did a lot of free work. Lawyers were well paid in his day, and he did a lot of work for no pay. Today we would call it pro bono. And he was widely regarded for standing up for the poor and the destitute in court and championing their cause. And it just, this story tapped all of the buttons for me. It was honor, it was humility, it was forthrightness, it was strength of character. It was legal. This is a man who was a master of his system. He was also regarded as an accomplished attorney. This was a man you didn't want to go into court and not have all of your ducks in a row, because he was going to own you when it came down to arguments before the bench. And that was St. Ivo of Brittany. And I read that a few times. I did a little bit more research, and I liked it. And saints' names are perfectly valid. Ivo is a period name. And there's a couple of modern invocations of it. There are actually several journalists and specialists in fields that I study outside of the SCA whose first name is Ivo, or a variation of that is Ivo. So it's rare. It's not common by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an established name. I liked it. So put the paperwork in and we named it. And I submitted it, and it took forever. I literally think it was 2 years to get back to me. Now, granted, this was, again, before the internet. The submissions process was just a whole different animal, which is another story unto itself. But yeah, it took about 2 years to get back to me. But yeah, the name was registered. Now that's half of my name. What about this other half, my surname? And again, we're going to go back in time just a little bit to high school, because when I was in 8th grade, we found out that I wasn't going to be going to one of the 2 high schools that already existed in the county. They were building a new high school. And the high school, all of the middle school students for that area of the county, they were polled as to, hey, what do you want to call it? So we all voted. There was an overwhelming vote that we really liked one name, so that name was selected, and it was Brook Point High School. Now, I know the Board of Supervisors had to sign off on it, and they could have vetoed it, but I remember we all really liked it, so the vote was still worth mentioning. And then about halfway through the school year, we had a big assembly, and they asked us, okay, here's some options. What mascot do you want? And they had a couple of good ones on there, but we all loved Brook Point Blackhawks, and our mascot was the Blackhawk. And then they actually did another polling for what costume should the athletic mascot wear, and we were all like, our mascot is the Blackhawk, why would it be anything else? But they had a pirate, and they had a couple of versions of bird-ish mascots, and we all kind of circled the wagons and said, Blackhawk, what part of this memo didn't you get? So I was part of the effort that created the identity for that school. And it wasn't 4 years of students that went in. Only freshmen, sophomores, and juniors went in. There were no seniors the first year. So while there were 2 graduating classes ahead of me, my class, the class of 97, we said we were the first true Blackhawks. 4 years at that school and no other. There were a lot of traditions that we started at that school. There were a lot of traditions that we helped codify. A lot of really important decisions were made in that school, and we were part of them. We were the Blackhawks. And that name, even though I don't have the fondest memories at all of high school, and even though it's not the point in my life that I look back on fondly, I still had that sense of pride, that sense of belonging that went into being part of the genesis of that school. So when it came time to pick a surname, I looked it up, and at the time the College of Heralds was still, actually the College of Arms, society level, was still registering color, animal, descriptor names. Now they've since stopped that. I think my name was the last one to squeak through. I'm not entirely sure, but they had registered Red Wolf before me. As a matter of fact, in the commentary process, someone even said, well, we registered Red Wolf, so we have to let Blackhawk through. Thank you, Rhiannon. But yeah, we wound up registering Blackhawk as my surname, as my family name. So I was at would have been about 20 years of age. My register, and I've been going by Ivo Blackhawk at that point for 2 years at that point. So, but yeah, at really the beginning of college, I reinvented myself. I rebranded myself as Ivo Blackhawk, whose name was an invocation of the patron saint of the ultimate figure of judicial honesty, and a mascot from my high school, one of the more important entities in my life at the time. And one of the things I learned over the years that I want to leave you with here is that, as important as that process was to me, you're not going to find too many people who know that story. And the reason being, it's not that I'm ashamed of it. It's not that I'm not wanting to share it. It's that at the end of the day, a name is nothing but a bunch of sounds you string together. We obviously have the confines here of historical, documentable, some anchor to history. But its meaning, what it evokes in the world around you, what people think of that name, and the person attached to it, that is something that you decide through your actions, through your character. You work hard to create that legacy after you start using the name. And that's what I've done. No one knows, really, I doubt anyone knows that I went to Brook Point High School, and no one knows or cares that their mascot was the Blackhawk. But you mentioned Blackhawk and Onsteora, and a lot of people know me because of the work I've put in heraldry and service, and now in arts and sciences. When you mention Ivo, it's the same thing. Nothing to do with my history before the SCA. It's what I've done since then that established the reputation in those names. Is this useful to you? I don't know. I hope the story helps spark conversation. Do I expect anyone to follow my pattern to use their high school mascot and patron saint's name? No, that would be lame just because it's such an obscure way to approach it. It worked for me because it's what I needed at the time. But understand that when someone hands you a book to choose a name, or more likely for my audience, when you're talking to a new member about how they choose a name, make sure they understand that this is a very personal thing, but it's how they get there is a wonderful, random, very personal journey that there is no defined road for. It's whatever they feel happy with at the end of the day. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate you watching these videos and sharing these moments with me. I hope that you take something out of them, and maybe you could share down below how you chose your name, or how you're leaning right now choosing a name. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, goodbye, God bless, and I'll see you at the next event. If there are two things I've learned that drive videos these days, it's controversy and engagement. Now, I am never going to fly the controversy flag on a regular basis. It's not what I'm here for. It's not the content I want to make, and I really don't think it helps any of us. But let's do engagement. If you like this video, please go down in the comments and leave a comment. Make sure to share the video. And last but not least, easiest of all, make sure to like the video. That helps drive the algorithm. It helps get the video views and helps promote this material. Thank you very much.